When it comes to being accepted by society, I think it goes without saying that sometimes people might go to extraordinary lengths to achieve it. But how far would you go just to simply not be viewed as an outcast? In the early 70s, one man would take his desire to be socially accepted to a level that would involve a series of horrific incidents that would eventually end in murder. And this man's name was Kuno Hofmann, aka the Vampire of Nuremburg. Welcome aboard, guys. I'm your host, Rob Diavalos, and this is Forensic Dive. I think it goes without saying that most human beings understand the concept of taking something too far. But I'd also like to add that that definition may vary depending on who you ask nowadays, if you catch my drift. But nevertheless, most of us do have that little voice in the back of our head that goes,
Turning the car into oncoming traffic is counterproductive!
Kuno Hofmann, however, was definitely one of the exceptions. This guy had some tremendous psychological issues, and like many other serial murderers, had a horrendous upbringing. Hofmann was born in Bavaria in 1931 to an absolute monster of a father that was arrested on multiple occasions for burglary, child and even attempted murder of a woman that he So yeah, just an absolute steaming pile of grade A. Throughout his childhood, Hofmann would receive regular beatings at the hands of his father, which became so intense that it eventually rendered him deaf and mute. So already, this guy's got a hell of a start. With little to no education, he would take to crime at a very early age, spending years in and out of mental institutions and escaping a total of 12 times. His poor education and lack of communication skills prevented him from gaining employment, which eventually sent him into a downward spiral. By 1971, Hofmann had spent only 5 years of his life outside of incarceration, which is insanity. Can you imagine only knowing life behind bars? They also say that that's a very common trait among inmates that are sentenced long term, that they don't know how to adjust to life on the outside once they're released, and sometimes end up back in prison as a result. I mean, hey, sometimes, when that's all you know, sometimes that becomes your comfort. But after his final release, Hofmann went to live with his brother and sister in Nuremberg, and it appeared for the first time that he was beginning to get his life somewhat on track. He was able to raise a little bit of money doing odd jobs, and he appeared to be adjusting to life on the outside very well. But all would prove in vain, as this year marked the beginning of a series of terror that would grip the entire country. In April of 1971, police and morgue attendants began investigating a span of different grave robberies that were carried out throughout different cemeteries in Nuremberg. At least 5 graves were discovered to be exhumed, and the remains within violated in various ways. The victims that were female were discovered to have been while others appeared to have been dismembered, mutilated, or even beheaded. Hofmann would continue this behavior for almost a year, excavating different graves that he would read about in the obituary, eventually bringing the total count to 35 corpses that had been mistreated. But eventually the dead would no longer satisfy him, and he would soon escalate to murder. On May 6, 1972, a man named Marcus Adler and his fiancée Ruth Lizzie were discovered to death in their car. Upon investigating, police noticed that the victims had been treated in the same fashion as the cadavers in the recent grave robbing incidents. Further inspection of Ruth indicated that her blood had been drained and that her body had been Not long after, another woman was discovered within the same vicinity and appeared to have been defiled in the same manner, although there are no resources to confirm the identity of this victim. By this point, the tabloids began to refer to the perpetrator as the Vampire of Nuremberg, and pressure fell quickly upon the police to apprehend the culprit. Then in late May, a morgue attendant named George Warmuth noticed something odd while doing his rounds of one of the local cemeteries. According to his testimony, he noticed a man hunched over behind a group of tombstones, and upon stepping closer, noticed that the man was passionately kissing a corpse that he had just unearthed. Obviously surprised by the attendant, the intruder then pulled out a pistol and fired one round at him before vanishing into the night. Luckily, the bullet missed him and the attendant was able to escape unharmed. He would later provide a detailed description of the intruder to the police, and not long after, they would detain a 41-year-old Kuno Hofmann. While in custody, he explained to officers that he was motivated by occult books that he became interested in while he was committed that would aid him in becoming handsome and popular among his peers. He became under the impression that certain rituals were instructing him to drink human blood and perform rituals over the dead. Right, because that's totally plausible and not unhinged whatsoever.
I think this boy's cheese slid off his cracker.
He would continue to study these quote-unquote sciences subsequent to his release from the institution, but once he became more and more alienated, these fantasies would soon come to fruition. When questioned as to why he chose to escalate from grave robbery to first-degree murder, he stated that live victims had a better quality of blood. The case soon went to trial, and the jury was conflicted as to whether he was even sane enough to be held accountable for his actions. Are you joking? This is obviously a case of premeditation.
Some people are really fucking stupid.
The defense pushed vigorously for an insanity plea, but luckily he was found to be of sound mind and able to distinguish between right and wrong. He explained through sign language while on trial that his vile acts committed upon corpses were due to his incapability of being able to carry a relationship with a living woman. Loser. I'm kidding, except not really, because he's a psychopath. Hofmann was inevitably sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and later admitted that if he had not been caught, that he would most definitely have continued with his deplorable deeds. While awaiting to be transferred to a federal penitentiary, he reportedly kept requesting one final taste of virgin's blood from the jailers on duty. Yeah, okay, no. Obviously, this guy was completely insane, but legally, he was sane while committing his crimes. He knew what he was doing, he was conscious of it the whole time, it was premeditated, he was, by definition, sane. And so ends the saga of an extremely disturbed individual. I think it just goes to show how much of a grip on our psyches the opinions and impressions of others about us are. Now, of course, there are some individuals out there like myself that are pretty much like, I don't care what you think of me. You either like me or you don't. But we've all been there at some point. I used to really care what people thought about me. We all want to feel accepted by somebody, and this is a perfect example of how some of us are willing to go to unthinkable lengths to achieve it. Thank you all so much for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to show your support by smashing that like button and subscribing to my channel. Also, feel free to leave me some feedback in the comments section and let me know if there's any other cases that you'd personally like for me to cover in the future. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay spooky. Peace!